Am I talking into the mic right now? Yeah? Okay. So, hello, everybody. I'm also very happy to be here. What I'm going to do is not a reading. I know some authors want to read from their books, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the research process involved in writing 97 Orchard, which for me was incredibly exciting. My idea when I started working on 97 Orchard was to uncover some fascinating piece of our culinary past, something completely unexpected. The truth is that living in New York, we're surrounded by the unexpected. And because it's so easy to lose sight of what's directly in front of you, I decided that tonight I'd like to open my talk with a few words about a really commonplace, but I would say really underappreciated eating experience, and that's the meal available to you in your local coffee shop. To remind you of what that meal might include, I'm going to read a selection of dishes from the menu at the Park Diner in Brooklyn, where I happen to live. And this is just an abbreviated selection. There is bagels, bialys, bagels with lox, bialy with lox, challah French toast, hummus with pita, scordalia with pita, quesadillas, chili con carne, fish tacos, potato pancakes, lamb souvlaki, chicken souvlaki, Hungarian goulash, Yankee pot roast, clam chowder, baked lasagna, fettuccine alfredo, eggplant parmigiano, rucola, strudel, and egg creams. As New Yorkers, we may take menus like this for granted. But the fact that foods from so many diverse backgrounds can emerge from one restaurant kitchen is a product of our unique history as a haven for immigrants. 97 Orchard tells a piece of that history. And tonight, I'll be giving you the backstory on a few key immigrant foods. Before I do, I'd like to say a few words about the people behind the foods, the immigrants who came to the Lower East Side in the 19th and early 20th centuries, and who you'll meet in my book. Most people think of the Lower East Side as the old Jewish ghetto, which of course it was. But historically, Jews were only one part of a much more complicated picture. East Siders were also German, Irish, Romanian, Hungarian, Greek, Syrian, Italian, and numerous other nationalities. Your typical East Sider arrived in this country with a life savings of roughly $20, often less. This person found work on the East Side. Among the people you'll meet in my book, for example, are garment pressers, dressmakers, tailors, heel cutters, road pavers, construction workers, and my personal favorite, rag pickers. In short, these were not people with the resources or the time or the inclination to document how they lived. East Siders, as a rule, did not keep diaries, they did not publish their memoirs, they did not collect their correspondence for future generations. East Side cooks did not commit their recipes to writing. Well, this information vacuum that I'm describing left me with a problem. How do I research these people? How do I figure out what they ate? The scarcity of what I call insider evidence, and these are records produced by the immigrants themselves, meant that I had to turn to outsiders, most of them native-born, who came to the Lower East Side to observe the immigrants on their native turf. These were people of means. They lived in private homes with all the basic amenities, light, heat, water, a maid to do the cleaning, a cook to run the kitchen. In other words, they belonged to the culture of uptown Manhattan, the city above 14th Street. In neighborhoods below 14th Street, 20 or 40 or 60 families, most of them immigrants, many of them poor, lived together under one common roof with few amenities and no privacy. Whole families often ate, slept, bathed, and worked in the same small room, a positive nightmare to the well-bred New Yorker. Uptowners came to the tenements for a variety of reasons. There were charity workers, settlement workers, missionaries, political reformers, the most famous of which is Jacob Riis. There were journalists and government officials of various stripes. One example from this last group were sanitary inspectors. These were employees of the Board of Health. It was a government body formed in 1866 who were assigned to investigate tenement living conditions. And it's thanks to one of these roving inspectors that we have an early and vivid description of one East Side culinary institution, the Tenement Poultry Farm, a business that flourished in New York from around 1870 to 1900. And what I'd like to do now is just read a brief excerpt from one of these sanitary reports. This one happened to be written and published in 1879. In New York, the Board of Health has carried on a struggle for some years, with occasional breathing spells for both combatants, against the practice of keeping poultry for sale in the manner practiced by Polish and Russian Jews. On the plea that their religion requires them to eat only those fowls that have been killed in their sight by a killer authorized under their ritual, they fill the places where they live with chickens, turkeys, ducks, and geese. These poor fowls are huddled together in coops or crowded into pens, generally in the basement of the house, and make an incessant noise. The smell, too, from 50 or 100 geese is indescribable and intolerable. And these people live in an adjoining room and wonder that any person finds their practice obnoxious. Well, I just want to point out, this is an aside, but something interesting here is that the sanitary inspector seems to have a sort of more sympathetic relationship with the poultry than he does with the people. This was actually typical. I should also point out that the Jews were not the only group to raise animals on the Lower East Side. Up until 1860, the East Side was home to thousands of Irish-raised pigs, animals that were set loose by their owners to forage in the streets. Their prime feeding ground were the curbs in front of butcher shops, fish shops, and vegetable markets. This was all highly offensive to the uptown New Yorker. But in their own way, the pigs were performing a really valuable community service. They were the neighborhood's most efficient street cleaners. When they were good and fat, the pigs were slaughtered, providing their owners with a windfall of basically free meat. Where the Irish kept pigs, the Italians kept goats. Another tradition carried over from the European countryside and transplanted to the heart of urban America. Italian goats were often kept in the apartments themselves and treated like family pets. If, for example, a homemaker was busy with her housework, she'd put the baby on the floor and have it play with the goat. Ingenious little Italian boys, and there seem to be quite a few of these, would hitch the family goat to wagons made out of empty soap boxes and race around the yards where their mother hung the laundry. Well, the fun came to an end. On feast days like Easter, when the family goat wound up on the family dinner table. Both of these animals, the goats and the pigs, were raised primarily for private consumption.